Good morning, everybody. Let us wait few minutes to join some other members. All of the members, please mute yourself. Don't try to create any type of the disturbance. Thank you. Hello. 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 Is it my voice is audible to everyone? Please respond anyone. Srinivas sir. Is it my voice is audible, sir? Hello. Hello.
Antibodies, but
Okay. Speak this picture. Yeah, please. Hello. Hello. Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we're discussing about the behavioral patterns. I hope my voice is audible to everyone. If it is not audible, please give me one message through chat box at least. So then I will try to verify once. Okay. So please respond anyone through chat box. Is it my voice is audible to everyone? At least one member. Please send one message. Is it my voice is audible to everyone? Srinivas sir. Srinivas sir. Is it my voice is audible to everyone? Okay, someone is giving reply. Okay, thank you. Thank you, 69. Okay, we can continue our class. Okay, so today we're discussing about the 15th, that is behavioral patterns. In the last class, we are discussing about creational patterns and analysis structural patterns. So we also know about what is the purpose of those patterns actually. So creational patterns are used for just only creating the objects. Structural patterns are used for arranging the objects, so which are required to forming the software architecture. So only those are arranged into the software architecture. So the type of the purpose for we are using the structural patterns. Now we're discussing about the behavioral patterns. I think the name is in place. Here we are verifying the behavior. So that means verifying the responsiveness or maybe in which type of way they behave. For example, maybe if you have clicked some button, so whether it is properly responded to the client or maybe whether it will be properly connected to the interface or not. So these type of things we are studied in this patterns. So and this is the 15th. Okay, and what are the topics of the behavioral patterns? So that is the first one is chain of responsibility, and another one command, second and third one interpreter, fourth one iterator, mediator, memento, observer, state, strategy, template method, visitor. I think the name is implies we are clearly understood. So chain of responsibility means here we are giving some chain. So that means some of the objects interconnected here. So and take the responsibility to executing the particular client request. In the same way, command, when we are using that command, then it will be performing different action. Interpreter performing interpreting. Iterator means in some type of situations we need to repeating the same thing. So mediator means we are based upon to the interface. Momentum means here we are giving some word. Observer means in which type of it will be performing the actions. And another one state, which type of state. Strategy means which type of strategy is used to solve the problem. Template method, giving the some template methods to solving the problems for the clients. And another one is the visitor. So here we are describes in the form in the view of clients. Okay, so in this type of a here, the behavioral patterns, we are considering these things. So the first one is chain of responsibility. So before going to that, first of all, to try to discuss what is the behavioral pattern. Okay, behavioral pattern refers to the class of design patterns that describe the way in which classes or objects communicate with each other with the use of concept called distributed responsibilities. So that means here the name is implies. Behavioral patterns refers to the class of design patterns that describe the way in which classes or objects to communicate with each other. So that means here we are verifying so in which terms they communicate. So whether the classes or maybe the objects communicate with each other with the use of concept called distributed responsibilities. So mainly behavioral patterns deals with the way objects interact and distribute the responsibility. I think the name is in place. Here we are already mentioned about that saying which type of a behave. So for example, which type of things behave here. So here we are consider the modules. So different types of modules, and we also know about different types of quality attributes also. So whether we are maintaining those type of quality attributes or not. So those type of things are also here verified. So that means in which type of a perform and what is the output. So what is the scalability. So whatever it may be, here we are consider each and everything. So that means, for example, we are consider some set of modules. So those type of modules are properly responded or not. So another thing is the chain of responsibility. Avoid coupling the sender of request to its receiver by giving more than one object a chance to handle the request, chain the receiver. So that means here we are avoiding the coupling between the sender and receiver. So and here the whatever it may be the request of the client that will be handled by more than one object. So that means here I'm previously mentioning about that the name is in place. Chain of responsibility means please wait me 1 minute. Please wait me 1 minute. Srinivas, Srinivas. Okay, thank you. Okay. Behavioral patterns deal with the way objects interact, they distribute the responsibility, chain of responsibility. Avoid coupling the sender of a request to its receiver by giving more than one object. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the disturbance. Actually, thank you. So that means here we are giving some set of objects handling the same type of request from the client. So that means here we are avoid the coupling between the sender and request and receiver. So why? Because so that means here initially client is some request is generated. So that request is handled by more than one object. So at this time of situation, any one of the object can able to uh, execute that particular request. So that's the main thing. Okay, that's the main thing. Please wait 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, objects can depass the request along the chain until the object handles it. So now behavioral patterns are two types. So those are behavioral class patterns, and another one is the behavioral object patterns. Okay, and another thing, behavioral class patterns can be divided into the two types. Those are template method pattern and another one is the interpreter pattern. Okay, so we'll try to discuss what is what. So first of all, we'll try to discuss about the template method pattern. Okay, template method pattern. I think the name is implies here. Define the algorithm structure with the operation. Okay, allow certain steps of these operations to be performed by subclasses. Redefine certain algorithm steps without performing any modifications to the skeleton of the algorithm. So that means here we are discussing about two types of behavioral patterns. Those are behavioral class pattern and another one is the behavioral object pattern. In the case of behavioral class pattern, consider two types. Those are template method pattern and another one is the interpreter pattern. I think the name is implies template method pattern means here we are based upon the some particular border or layout or maybe the some skeleton. Okay, so that means we are based upon the some layout. Okay, here mainly we are based upon the defined algorithm structures within the operation. So that means which type of algorithms are used. Okay, so in which type of we are using. We also know about what is a template. For example, in our phones also we are having some templates. For example, I am busy, call you later. Okay, we'll catch you later. So I can't talk now. I'm right. So we are using those templates for according to our situation. In the same way, here also template method pattern giving some template. So allow certain steps of these operations to be performed by subclasses. Redefine certain algorithm steps without performing any modifications to the skeleton algorithm. So that means here we are redefine the algorithm. So what is the algorithm? Set of steps. Okay, and another than interpreter pattern. This pattern specifying the representation of grammar of a given language. These patterns are used for interpreting the sentences of the language. Okay, so that means here what is the purpose of interpreter? So interpreter purpose is executing the instruction by line by line. We also know about this. So at this time of situation, definitely based upon to the grammar. Why? Because how it will be performing the interpreting and how it will be knows whether it is correct or not. So that means previously we are giving some set of knowledge to the comparer. We also know about this. Okay, so here first of all it will be verified. So whether the grammar is maintained in the proper way or not. So that type of the thing will be done by interpreter pattern. Okay, so behavioral object patterns. So what is the purpose of behavioral object pattern? In the case of behavioral class pattern, are considered the two types. Those are template method pattern and one is the interpreter pattern. In the case of template method pattern, based upon some template to define algorithms. Okay, and another one is the interpreter pattern. It will be verifying the grammar. Now we are discussing about the behavioral object pattern. So these patterns are used for distributing the behavior among the objects using the object composition technique. So the main purpose of using the behavioral pattern is in which type of a behavior. So that means, so here we are considered different types of modules. Those modules are properly responded or not. So that means here we are distributing the behavior. So that means, for example, maybe we are performing the execute operation. So that execute operation is shared by more number of clients. Client request is generated by initially client request is generated, then that request is handled by more than one object. So that at this time of situation, we try to giving the distribution among them. So then only those type of objects handle that type of the request. Okay. Whatever it may be, we have previously mentioned that will be mentioned here. So main purpose of behavioral class patterns are responsible for describing the algorithms as well as control flow by employing the inheritance approach. So it means in the case of behavioral class patterns, those are responsible for describing the algorithms and maintain the control flow and using the inheritance approach. So here we are using template method pattern and interpreter pattern. We are discussing about this. Now we're discussing about the chain of responsibility. So previously I mentioned about this decouple sender of a request from receiver. Give more than one object a chance to handle. Flexibility in assigning responsibility often applied with the composite. So I think just here we have mentioned the important points only. First thing, decouple sender of a request from the receiver. So that means initially whenever client is request is generated, then applying the decoupling between the sender and request receiver, then give more than one object chance to handle. So, for example, maybe whenever the client is click some particular interface, then that type of request will be handled by more than one object. So at the time of the situation, definitely that request is processed and it will be giving back to the client, and client will be the satisfied. So in some type of situations, we are not able to verify so whether the client request is processed or not. So for example, if you are consider our customer care, maybe we are generating some request, maybe we are raising some error, or maybe we are raising some complaint, or raising some query. Okay, but in some type of situations, our query is not processed up to some days. Am I right or not? So why this type of situation has happened? There is no occurring of the chain of responsibility. So for example, if there is chain of responsibility, any one of the object can able to handle this request. But if you are not based upon the chain of the responsibility, only one object can only interacting with the particular interface. So that means whenever the client is request is generated, then only one object will be interconnected with that particular request. So here, so we are handling the more than one object. So at the time of the situation, we are easily solve the problem of the client, and we try to satisfy the client also. Okay, flexibility in assigning responsibility often applied with composite. So that means here we are using more than one object. So that's why I mentioned composite. So and we try to see what is chain of responsibility. Avoid coupling the sender of a request to its receiver by giving more than one object a chance to handle the request. In other words, decouple the object that initiated the request from object that is responsible for handling it. So this is typically done by allocating the responsibility of handling the request to multiple objects that are chained together. So that means here we are avoiding the coupling between the sender and receiver. Okay, and whatever it may be request is generated by the client or maybe the sender. So that request is handled by more than one object. So after, then it will be connected to the particular client. Okay, if you are observing this diagram, so chain of responsibility pattern. For example, if you are observing the figure one, structure of chain of responsibility. So here, initially client will be raising some request. Now, handler will be shared to the different types of handlers. If you're observing here, concrete handler 1, concrete handler 2, up to concrete handler n. So that means whatever it may be client, for example, maybe the client may be open some particular module. So in that module, maybe he's raising some issue. Okay, that issue will be handled by more than one object sphere. So those type of objects handling based upon to the concrete handling. Okay, so and second one is chain of responsibility. Okay, uh, chain of responsibility pattern. So how it will be handled. So if you are observing the figure 2, so structure of object chain of responsibility patterns. So initially client will be connected to some handler. Then concrete handler 1 connects to the successor. Then successor connects to the another successor of the concrete handler 2. So in the same way, more than one objects handling the request of the client. That means here we are decoupling the sender of request to its receiver by giving more than one object chance to handle the request. So that means at this time of situation, it will be processed within the time, and there is no chance of missing the request of the client. And here we try to satisfy the client within the time. So if we are maintaining the processing time within the time, then the client will be also satisfied and giving the good rating for our software. So this is the first and best property. So we should be try to maintain the chain of responsibility. Okay, then there is no chance of occurring the problem in terms of the clients. Okay, next applicability. I'm also mentioning about one thing in the previous classes also. When we were discussing about the patterns, we try to mention in each and every context. For example, maybe applicability, consequences, or maybe motivation. Okay, collaboration, like this. Okay, first of all, please wait 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, applicability. So when we are based upon the chain of responsibility. So when the single request is being handled by multiple objects and the information about allocating the request to object that is capable of handling the request is not known. So that means whenever that situation is happened, so then we are based upon to the chain of responsibility. This information must be provided to the handler automatically. So when a request needs to be issued to one of the multiple objects without explicitly defining about the receiver, who can handle the request? When the set of the objects that are capable of carrying out the request is specified during the execution time. So that means in some type of situations you don't know. So who is the receiver? So at that time of the situation also we are based upon the chain of responsibility, and any one of the object may be performing the execution or maybe handling that request which is generated by the client. Okay, then motivation. So in which type of we are ready, and which type of we try to arrange the situation. That is nothing but motivation. To understand the motivation of the chain of responsibility pattern, consider an example of an online help system that serves the request generated by users that need assistance while working with an interface or any part of it. So that means here we are considering some example. That example is online help system. So that serves the request generated by users that need assistance while working with an interface or any part of it. For example, maybe some client is maybe generating some request. So actually here we are developing some software that is nothing but online help system. For example, maybe the client needs some particular thing. Then he is raising some request. Now that request is handled by more than one object if you are based upon the chain of responsibility. So at the time of the situation, we are using the chain of responsibility. This information is used to organize it in accordance to their generality level from more specific to more generic. The help request is issued by the client, passed to multiple user interface objects that are interconnected. Among these objects, only one object is capable of handling the request. Actually, this is the situation. If you are not using the chain of responsibility there, then that request is reached to the more than one object, but that request is handled by only one object. So at this time of situation, we don't know whether the client request is processed or not. So in some type of situation, maybe the clients may be facing different types of problems also. Why? Because this is an online help system. So maybe whenever he is facing some problem, then only he is generate some request. Am I right or not? So at this time of situation, we need to giving the responsiveness. So or maybe we try to giving the some response within the time. Okay. So that is not possible whenever that request is handled by only one object. Okay, if you are giving the chance to handle them more than one object, that is possible. In some type of situations, client request is not properly finished. Why? Because here that request is handled by only one object. To avoid these type of situations, for using the chain of responsibility. The main objective of chain of responsibility is loosen the coupling between sender and receiver by allowing handling of requests to several objects. Okay. The same thing will be here represented here. So there is help handler, okay, and here we will try to giving the chance for giving more than one object. Okay, next participants. Who are the participants? So handler, concrete handler, sender. So that means here in initially client will be generating the request. That request is handled by the handler. Now the handler will be connected to the more than one handlers. Those are referred to as concrete handler. Okay. So that means initially client is raising some request. That request is passed to the handler. Now the handler, the same request will be sending to the more than one concrete handler. We are already observed in the diagram. So if you observe in the diagram, so initially client generates the request, then handler will be receiving the request. Now that request is passed to the more than one concrete handler. So that means these are handlers are used for to handle the objects or maybe the handle that request by the objects. Okay. So those are the participants here. Handler, what is the purpose of handler? It defines the common interface shared by every object on the chain in order to handle the request. So that means the main purpose of handler is it will be act like as a common interface. shared by every object. So that means whatever it may be considered the objects. So those are interconnected, and another thing, it implements a link associated with the successor object. So that means a handler can be having some link. That link connects to the successor. So that means next one, next handler. Okay, concrete handler. It is capable of accessing its successor object. So whatever it will be, it will be receiving from the handler. So that will be accessed. And if it is not capable of handling the request, then object pass to the request of its successor. So that means in some type of situation, those type of objects also not able to handle that request. So at that time of the situation, that request will be passed to the next one. So and the next one is sender. So the sender is responsible for issuing the request, which is passed to a concrete handler object present on the chain of handlers. Okay. Our next topic is command. So I hope all of the members able to understand what is the chain of responsibility. So please give me 1 minute. Please give me 1 minute. Actually here. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Okay, we can continue with the next topic. So that is command. Okay, so I previously mentioned about what is a command. Okay, command. So we also know about what is a command. When we are using some command, then it will be performs some particular functionality. Am I right or not? For example, maybe if it is open, then open the document. If it is closed, then close the document. Okay, if it is search, then it will be search the required content from the particular document. Am I right or not? So that means here, when we are using some command, then it will be performs its relative functionality. So command is an action or transaction. Okay, so transaction is also considered as a one of the command. So for example, transaction means a series of actions. We also know about that. So what is an action? For example, if you are considered in the DBMS, for example, maybe we are perform some action. So what's that action? For example, maybe we are adding some content to the existing database. That is also one of the action. Okay, so that action will be performed by using some command. Am I right or not? So that means when we are using some insert option, okay, or maybe when we are using some update option, then only adding some data to the existing one. So that means that is also we can treat it as a command, and it will be treated as a transaction also. The intent of this behavioral command pattern is perform request encapsulation so as to represent the request in the form of object. The encapsulation allows the client object to be parameterized with different requests. So that means whatever it may be the request of the client, that will be generated through command. For example, maybe if you are consider the Unix operating system, we are having different types of commands. Am I right or not? For example, maybe if you want to know how many number of users are there, okay, then which type of command will be used? Who? Am I right or not? So that will be displayed how many number of users are logged in on that particular time. So in the same way, so if you want to know the date time, so just we simply giving the date command. So if you want to know about how many number of files are there, so then we try to giving by using ls command. Am I not? Am I right or not? So that means here we are using different commands to nothing but we are sending our requests through using the commands. So the same thing will be mentioned here. Perform request encapsulation So here the request is encapsulated in the command. So as to represent the request in the form of object, the encapsulation allows the client object to be parameterized with different requests. So that means different requests are encapsulated in the form of a command. So maintain a log file or request objects. So that means here the command will be maintain different types of commands also. So that means how many number of requests are generated or which type of requests are generated. So those are maintained as a one file. So provide support for performing the undoable operations on the objects. So that means, for example, in some type of situations not properly function those type of commands. Then we try to finish whatever it may be previously. Those type of commands are not working. Okay, so what is the motivation? To understand the motivation of this pattern, consider an example of user interface toolkit that consists of many objects such as buttons, menus, text box, radio buttons, etc. For example, maybe if you are consider some toolkit. So what is our purpose is, so we try to create some form. For example, maybe if we are creating our, for example, maybe we are creating our biodata or maybe the resume form. So for example, if it is a biodata, then we try to giving different types of forms in that particular biodata. Am I right or not? By using the toolkit, we are creating different types of buttons. For example, maybe we are using radio buttons for gender. So, and we try to giving the check boxes for defining the qualification, and we try to giving the test boxes for describe ourselves, and we try to giving some test boxes for entering our name. So in the same way, here we are using different types of buttons. So that means here the button will be treated as a one command. So when we are click that button, then that button will be inserted into the document. So that is also the command. So in which type of way we are ready, we try to arrange. So those type of situations, when we are click that one, then it will be added to the document. So whenever user provides an input, these objects perform their corresponding operation and generate the results output. Am I right or not? So that means whenever the particular, for example, maybe the client maybe click the radio button, then that radio button will be put in the document, and it will be performs its desired functionality. For example, what is the functionality of radio button? For example, when we are giving more than one option, then if you are click one radio button, then it will be allowing any one of the option only, not giving the everyone. For example, if it is a checkbox, we can select the more than one. But in the case of radio buttons, we can select only one. Okay. So the object that initiated the request doesn't have the explicit knowledge about what operations are being performed and who is responsible for handling the request. So that means the command purpose is just only performing its functionality, but not verifying so who is the sender and who is receiver and who is handling the request like this. In order to make a toolkit capable of implementing the request, many toolkit designers are command pattern. So that means here the toolkit is capable of implementing the request. Am I right or not? So that means here the what is the request of the client? So just generating the form of like biodata. Okay. So collaboration. Clients issues a new concrete command request for creating concrete command object along with the intended receiver. So that means collaboration means in which type of way interconnected. So that will be specified in the collaboration. So client issues a new concrete command request for creating command object along with intended receiver. So that means here client generates some request. Okay, that will be perform some functionality and that will be connected to the receiver. So that means after finishing that request, then it will be received to the receiver. The client sends a store command request to the invoke object that store concrete command object. So that means if you are using command is store, then it will be performing the same operation. Okay. So after sorting, the invoker implements an execute operation on that command and issues a request to the command object. So that means, for example, maybe after sorting, the invoke implements an execute operation on that command, issues a request to the command object. The operations defined on the receiver objects are implemented by concrete object so as to handle the request issued by the client object. So that means in this type of way, so how it will be interconnected means whenever some particular request is raised by the client, then those type of operations are maintained as a log, and we try to performing the sorting and after finishing the type of the command, then it will be interconnected to the receiver also. Okay, if you are observe here, so the structure of command class and subclasses here. So initially, if you consider command, so the command may be different types of commands. So not only this command, macro commands, or maybe open command, execute command, so paste command. So whatever it may be, here we are considering different types of commands. We also know about different types of commands. Am I right or not? For example, maybe ls is a one command. Okay, date is a one command, and who is one command. Okay, in this type of we are having different types of commands. We also know about some filter commands also, grep. Okay, like that. Okay, so the command we are having different types of subclasses. Whenever it is executed, then it will be maintained as a one file. So that will be represented in the form of diagram here. So another thing is applicability. When we are using the command, so what is the need? So the objects are parameterized an action that specifies the operation to be performed. So that means here the objects can be parameterized by an action. So that means by the action only we are performing different types of requests. Then we are based upon the command. The user can make the use of procedural language for parameterizing the object along with callback function. For example, maybe if we are using some command, for example, we are using date command in the Linux operating system. Then which type of output will be we are received? So after we are enter the date, then press the enter. Then it will be giving the present date. At the same time, we are able to receive the command cal also. Am I right? So for example, maybe if you are giving who, so if you are giving who command, then press the enter. Then it will be giving some list of users who are logged in that particular tab. Am I right or not? So that means here, whenever we are using that command, then it will be giving some callback function. So that means initially we are calling some request. So after performing that request or processing that request, it will be giving some feedback, or maybe it will be giving some response, or maybe it will be work like some callback function. So it is a function which is declared and invoked at different places sometimes. Commands can act as an object-oriented substituent for callbacks. So that means in different types of places, in different types of times, these functions are used as a callback function. So that means when we are using the function, so actually it is a one function, am I right or not? So if, for example, maybe if you are clicking some, if you are giving some command data, so actually it is a one of the function. So when we are giving that function, then it will be giving some result through callback, am I right? So the requests are to be specified, queued as well as executed in different times. In some type of situations, for example, maybe we are able to giving more than one command at a time. Am I right? By using semicolon in the Linux operating system or maybe Unix operating system. So we are able to work more than one command at a time, and we are using giving the symbol of pipelining also. So that means one command output is treated as input for the another command. So at the time of the situation, so these are in the form of some queue, and these are executed in different times. So the first one, whenever the first one is executed, then only the second one is executed. So that means maintained as a queue. So in this type of way, these are executed. Okay, and another thing, please wait here 1 minute. Okay, fifth one, command object can exist till the request gets handled successfully. The existence of command object does not depend upon the lifetime of request. So that means here the command will be performed only on that particular time. So it is not having some lifetime. Just only it's based upon to the up to receiving another command. Okay, when an address space independent approach is used for representing the receiver's request, then prior to satisfying the request, a command object must be transferred to different process. This process is responsible for handling the request service. So that means when an address space is independent approach is used for representing the receiver's request, then prior to satisfying the request, a command object must be transferred to different processes. So that means in some type of situations, it will be handled by more than one object to processing whatever it may be our request in the form of command. Okay, so if you are observe here, this is actually sequence diagram. So in this sequence diagram here, we are mentioned. So initially mentioned receiver, client, command, invoker. So that means initially client will be generates the request or maybe the command. So that command invoking the some particular set of actions. After those type of actions, so then those results will be sent to the receiver. So here we are mentioned through sequence diagram. So previously mentioned the same thing. When you explain any one of the thing in this subject, better you try to explain through the diagrams, or because that is the best way to representing the content. Then only who are reading the particular content, they are easily understood. Okay, so this is the actually the structure of command. So initially client will be generating the concrete command. So that means he is generating some request. That request is in the form of command. For example, he wants to know the date. Then in which type of he knows the date by using command. So that means initially the client will be connects to the command, then the command will be connects to the concrete command. So that means the relevant command will be connected and perform the action, and the result will be sent to the receiver. Am I right or not? So that is represented in the form of flow diagram here. Okay, so better you try to explain the whatever it may be the content. So that is explained through command. So today we are discussing about just only what is a behavioral pattern. So what are the types of behavioral patterns? In that behavioral patterns, we are discussing about the first one is chain of responsibility and another one is the command. Actually, these are very small topics, but I try to giving some examples to explain that the content actually. Okay, you try to follow the same manner in the exam point of view. Why? Because here the examples are the plays main role here. Why? Because if we are giving small definition, then maybe that is not able to carry total marks of the question. So in the exam point of view, maybe asking 7 marks for what is the chain of responsibility, explain like this. Then how we can explain the chain of responsibility? What is the chain of responsibility? Decoupling the sender request, and it will be handle that request by more than one object. Am I right? So, but here we are not able to explain in that manner. So, just we try to give some example. So, and we try to give in the some through some diagrams. At the same time, we try to explain the same thing will be in the different types of contests. Maybe the what is a collaboration, what is a motivation, so what are the consequences, what is the applicability. Okay, like this. You please you try to explain the same thing in different types of contests. We are even though we are explaining the same thing, but we try to explain in different type of context. So please follow that. And another one we are discussing about today, command. What is a command? Command is an action or a transaction. So when the request is generated from the client, then the relevant command will be invoked and the result will be sent back to the receiver. So here the receiver is also a client. Okay, if any member is having any about the doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, we can end the session. Okay. I think all of the members able to understand what we are discussed today. Okay. If any member is having any about the issue, please raise. Please try to unmute yourself and ask me now. Otherwise, we can end the session. And if you have any about the doubts regarding the subject, you can contact me personally. And if you have any about the issues regarding the attendance, so contact the Srinivas sir. Okay, but you don't try to contact the Srinivas sir after the class. So for example, maybe class is 9 to 9:50. If you are raising your request, maybe sir, I'm present. So if your request is at 4 to 5, then there is no use. Better you try to respond within the class. If you're having any type of the network problems, signal problems, so like this. Okay. Okay. I can now I end the session. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.